Hello and welcome to the first episode of the 1971 podcast, a podcast created by me, Fran Lever, about women's football. I graduated from university in 2021 with a Masters in Sports Journalism, and since last April I've been freelancing at the BBC, working mainly for Sport and 5 Live. I've decided to do this to talk more in detail about the women's game and do it in more than 3 minutes on TikTok because I often find myself rambling and running out of time. I just wanted to add a quick side note that I want to try and talk about current issues in a fair way, but also at the same time have my opinion on them. I welcome any feedback and will share any comments. So the first thing that I want to talk about is creating rivalries within the women's game after a tweet came under fire, which I called out for classism. So I just want to break down this tweet, the undertones, the explanation from the user, and then the rise of rivalries within the women's game. This is no hate towards this person. I just disagree with what they've said. I won't share their username, but I'm guessing a lot of people will know who and what tweet I'm talking about, but I'm not going to actively encourage sending hate to someone. It's a difficult balance because this person needs to be called out for the tweet, but at the same time, I'm very aware of the toxic hate train that can start against someone. It's important to get that right. So the tweet, where do I begin? I don't like to read this out, but I need to give you content. It was a chant created for Manchester United's new signing, Jade Riviera. Jade is from Canada, so I believe this person tried to make a chant relating to Canada, but it was the ending that really annoyed people. The ending read, could be worse, could be scouts eating trash in your council house. I'm sorry if that's triggering to anyone. I tweeted at the time, all for creating rivalries within the women's game, but let's not make it about social classes when Manchester is struggling. Plus, there's nothing wrong with living in a council house. Please do better. I ended it with a fellow BBC employer, because I was under the impression at the time this person worked for the BBC, but I'm not sure now. That's not what's important here. The important thing is that this stinks of classism. The excuse was used of creating rivalries, which I get, but I will get to the general point of rivalries in a moment. But let's just break down this tweet, shall we? Yes, historically there is a big rivalry between Manchester United and Liverpool in the men's team. Everyone who follows football, especially English football, knows that. Again, I'll get to the general point of rivalries in a moment. And I get wanting to transfer that into the women's game. It can be fun. Make football what it is. That is what football is all about, the rivalries. But let's not make it classist. The bottom line is there's absolutely nothing wrong with living in a council house. I lived in council houses. And here I am working for the BBC, recording a podcast at the same time and making a difference in the world. Living in a council house does not define you, so to use that as an insult is incredibly wrong. Now more than ever, we are trying to break the stigma towards the working class. It's a house, you have 4 walls, you have a place to live. That is the most important thing. It doesn't matter if you rent or you've bought that house. My next thought when seeing this tweet was to read the room. Please read the room. You live in Manchester, where homelessness is probably one of the worst it is in the country. Then there's people across the city in council houses. There's people across this entire country in council houses. I'm from Yorkshire. Council houses everywhere. Good. Gives people access to houses. Birmingham, London, Bristol, Cardiff, Newcastle. I could legit sit here and list all the cities in the UK that have council houses. It's not exclusive to Liverpool. People up and down this country are struggling. We're in a cost of living crisis. I'm not going to turn into a 5 Live show, don't worry. But that every day covers the issues that we are facing. I applaud you for carrying on, but let's not use it as an insult towards Liverpool where it's everywhere. It's everywhere in this country. It's also important to highlight that the song chant, whatever you want to call it, the tune or the song is based off a racist one. That baffles me, honestly, I don't understand it. The person in question said they would not apologise as we should not infantilise women's football. I'm struggling to get my head around that one. People are not reacting because we don't believe in rivalries. We're calling it out because the whole thing is just classist. This leads me onto rivalries in women's football. It's true, it is not the same as it is in men's. I think a lot of this comes from sometimes not having a designated away stand or people not being able to get tickets there. I was at the Manchester Derby last month at the Etihad, and to be fair to City, they did have an away stand, but not all those United fans could get tickets. I was in a stand that was with City and United fans mixed. Now, I've been to a lot of derbies at the Academy, but this was different as it was at the Etihad. And these fans were being as loud as each other in the same stand. In the men's game, you would never have that, ever, unless you were looking for a fight. I am not saying in any means that the women's game should ever get to that level, but it is going to be interesting to see how that rivalry goes. I've also been to games like United versus Chelsea at Lee, again, in a mixed stand. It was calm, which is so much better than being worried trouble was going to kick off, but also a weird feeling that I think it just needs to grow. I was at the Chelsea and Arsenal game at the Emirates game this month. Now I felt that. The rivalry, to me, that rivalry I feel is a proper one within the Women's Super League. I call it a calm version of the men's team. Rivalry is good, like so good. It is a sport. It makes it fun, but in no way, in my opinion, should it be at the level that it is in the men's game at times. Because there's all sorts of concerns there. I do think it's important that we have rivalries. But it is important to mention the negative sides of rivalry, as people are often comparing it to the men's game. Rivalries are good. Banter is good. What is not good is the negative side. We don't want that. And back to my original point, we don't want rivalry when there's classism, racism, any type of ism or phobia. It's a flat out no for me. It is 2023. We need to do better. Now, my next topic is a tricky one. You could say it's a slippy one. Okay, that is terrible. I'm sorry. I think we've got to a point where we've got to laugh about it or we'll just cry because of how serious it is. Frozen Pitchgate. Frozen pitches. Now, there is so much to be said here that I can probably not fit into this podcast. Like, so much. It's not exclusive to women's football. I am not arguing that. The issue is nationwide, especially in the lower leagues. It's happening in the men's game too. So I'll listen to that argument, I will. For example, Exeter City was supposed to play at home to Barnsley. Fans travelled down from South Yorkshire, which is a 4 to 5 hour trip, similar to the trip Liverpool fans did down to Kingsmeadow. Communication from Exeter was not the best, to say the least, and they postponed the game like only a few hours before the game. It happens every season. We're living in a country that is so unpredictable for weather. You can never truly call it. Barnsley responded so well, in my opinion. They said in a statement, which I think echoes the whole thing. Whilst money is tight for a lot of people in the current time, we feel that more consideration should have been taken by the authorities to make sure a swifter decision to accommodate the travelling supporters. They then announced a inter-squad fixture at Oakwell on Saturday for the fans that travel down for the game, and have said the game is free to them with free food and drink. I just think that's an incredible response, and just had to give them a shout out for that. Not just because they're my hometown and naturally my first team. I never want to come across bias in these podcasts, so that's probably the only time I'll make a confession like that, but I do plan to cover their women's team in future podcasts because they are making waves at the moment. They've just been part of the historical FA Cup fixture against Newcastle. More on that another day. Just want to go back to that statement though, that they said about consideration to fans, and then reflect it to Sunday. On Saturday, Spurs made a decision to postpone their game, which was the correct thing to do. They gave the notice. With what happened at Kingsmeadow, I believe there's no single person to blame. It is a collection of people. I have seen from a lot of fans and journalists blaming Chelsea and Emma Hayes. I think we're all guilty of using a club's name for a collective term when being critical. What we need to do is separate the managers, the players, the coaching staff and everyday staff from people on the board. I think most of the time the intention is there, but it's just not clear. That needs to change. The people at Chelsea to blame were nowhere near Kingsmeadow on Sunday. Nowhere near there. It is Emma Hayes that's getting the brunt of the hate, and that is wrong. What's she supposed to do? Refuse to go on and protest with Matt Beard? What's the consequence of that? Point deducting, match bans, kicked out of the league. The list goes on. This is supposed to be top flight of women's football in England. So yes, games like Exeter versus Barnsley were postponed to in the men's games, but those teams are currently in League One. As blunt as it sounds, that is expected for the aspects of their stadiums, because it's not the same as the Premier League stadiums. There were reports when Sheffield United were promoted to the Premier League, they struggled to match the requirements that were there. This is the Women's Super League, top flight women's football, or supposed to be. This is the top of the pyramid, like the Premier League. Now, I'm not suggesting that all WSL stadiums and everything else become like the men's game overnight. That takes time. We're playing catch up here. That is why the game is so behind. We'll get onto that another day. WSL is one of the most popular and watched women's league in the whole world. You have some of the biggest names in the world playing in this country, past and present. Sam Kerr, Leah Williamson, Vivian Miedema, Beth Mead, Janine Becky, Sam Ewers. We even had Alex Morgan on loan at Spurs. I don't like to talk about that much. The fact that that happened in the pandemic and we never truly got to see her play feels like a fever dream. With Alex though, she walked into Spurs and commented that they should be having the same facilities as the men. I mean, they must be good now because Kristen Ewers trains their off-season at Spurs and still sends fans into a craze every time she's photographed in training gear or near the ground that she's going to Spurs. Kristen Ewers at Spurs in the WSL? What a thought. I'm getting off topic. Anyway, we have all these names, but most of the time they're playing in League 2 conditions. Depending how you look at it, 3 or 4 of the current 12 WSL teams have under-pitch heating to prevent frozen pitches. Reading, Manchester United, Manchester City. Then Leicester, who play a good percentage of their games at King Power. A heavy argument I am seeing is that Chelsea own Kings Meadow. So they can just put under-pitch heating in, right? It's not as simple as that. Just because you own land doesn't mean you can automatically build on it. There's been talks of extensions in general for the stadium. There's a number of factors to consider here, where one could be the case, or it could be a mixture. First, the staff at Chelsea Women, it's important to emphasise that, could have put in a number of requests to the board, the people with the money basically, and it could have been refused. Frank Kirby said in September of 2022 that the facilities there were not acceptable. Apparently, those comments came from the new owners too. That request could have been approved, or it might have been refused from those who give out the money. So let's say, hypothetically, Chelsea said yes. They can just go building, right? No. They have to get permission from the council, even though they own the stadium and the land. The stadium is surrounded by houses. The council still have the power to say no, and Chelsea can do nothing. Appeals take a long time. And the way the councils are in backlog, that is going to take a long time. Second, I'm reading, Chelsea have the money, so why don't they just spend it? Of course they have money. They're the 8th richest football club in the world. There's no disputing that. People are saying, why can't they just use the money they got for Bethany England? It's not easy to just dish out money like that. That will just go into another pot and they won't see that for a while. It will probably be instalments as well, that transfer fee. It's a different business from stadium maintenance. Now, I get it's not a good look that in the men's transfer window they've been spending so much money. High fees that have been slapped with financial fair play because they plan to do the transfer fee in instalments over a long period of time. I just want to be real for a moment. Football is run on money, power and status. It is the ugly truth. The two options, just imagine this, just as a hypothetical situation. You've gone to someone at the board and they've been given 2 options. Give 700k for under-pitch heating for the women's team, or contribute it towards the buying of a male player that might go somewhere else and affect the market. To them, the answer is simple. It's all about the money. But it is how it is. We can only do so much. I am not saying that every single person at that level is the same, but I definitely think there is a percentage. Now, let's just take Chelsea out of the picture for a moment. They are one club in the WSL. They're just getting all the negativity because it was their match at their stadium that was cancelled. Other clubs don't own their stadiums. Spurs are at Leighton, Liverpool are at Tranmere, Villa are at Walsall, Brighton are at Crawley, West Ham are at Chigwell, Everton are at Walton, and Arsenal are at Meadow Park. These are League 2 and National League stadiums. To put under pitch heating, you're going to have to get permission from these clubs. They don't have the money. And then if they do get it and other things to match what they need, Doesn't that give the men's team an advantage when they're playing in their own leagues because they have better stadiums than their opponents? My opinion is that every WSL team should have their own stadium and not be sharing with a lower league. But how are they going to do that? Where are they going to put them? Will the club fund it? Not every club can be lucky and have both their stadiums across the road from each other like at City. There's not just one answer because every suggestion just creates more questions. So who does that fall to? It's the FA. It is them that make the final decisions with the clubs. They were part of the decision for the game to go ahead on Sunday. It was probably a lot to do with the BBC slot. It's prime time. There's no guarantee that they will get that again. I saw a journalist say, the FA, they owe women's football. And I agree with that to an extent. As I said earlier, we're currently playing 50 years catch up, but it should not take another 50 years to do that. They, again, a universal they because the people who decided are long gone, banned the game for 50 years for whatever reasons. In those years where it was banned, the men's game had time to grow to what it is now. Women's football isn't going to be there, not for the longest time. But something's got to give to help us play catch up. I say to an extent because the counter argument will be, you're so entitled, you're so hard done by, you want everything for nothing, etc, etc, etc. No, I think having a similar placing as the men internationally for years and then to win a European title warrants for something. Do I want women to get every single thing that the men have tomorrow? No, that is another debate, but I do want them to have access to the same opportunities. To me, under-pitch heating should be essential in top-flight football, but there's so much to think about than just going out tomorrow and putting it in. So many different factors and hoops the women have to jump through. It is easy to use Chelsea as a scapegoat right now, but just stop and think. They're in exactly the same position as everyone else. Owning your own stadium means absolutely nothing, and this proves that. Right, let's get on to some actual games, shall we? I'm writing and flash recording this fresh off the Conti Cup, so I'm going to go there. So we have our 4 semi-finalists: City, Chelsea, West Ham and Arsenal. West Ham. I am so happy for West Ham. I went to their game against City a few weeks ago in the WSL. First time I'd seen them play in a long time, like in person. I think they're a great team with such potential. Mackenzie Arnold is so underrated, I think. Also plays internationally for Australia, so it's a given. She won't get spoke about enough, but she deserves some credit. Overall, a really decent team, and I'm excited to see where they go this season. Bad luck for Liverpool, a very tight game until that 87th minute goal. Another team, Liverpool, I think is going to go far. These are the kind of games that I live for, because they're two very similar teams in terms of placing in the WSL. 7th and 9th in the table at the moment. You can never truly call it. City. I mean, this competition means so much to them, and any other result would have been a shock. Also, I know I said I wouldn't get biased too much, but this is a personal plea to Gareth Taylor. Please, and please again, start Hannah Rasser more. Please. She, in my opinion, is one of City's best players, and embraces what you get when you start her. Just please. And her in the front three with Bunny Shaw and Lauren Hemp is probably the best option for City with a front three. Now, the 2 games fans were dreading because of the transfer window. I'm going to add some emotional music at post-production if it allows me to, or I can work it out because I'm not that tech savvy. So, I'm going to start with Spurs and Chelsea. I do feel like that was the warm-up to Arsenal versus Villa, but it didn't make it any less weird. I guess we don't like major changes overall in football, because I remember being at the Spurs and Villa game the other week and seeing Bethany England in a Spurs kit, and I said to my friend, okay, now this feels real. This feels weird. I don't know if I like it or I do like it, but I don't know. Then I saw Jordan Nobbs in a Villa kit seconds later, and my soul became a screaming meme. I know we've seen the pictures, the interviews, but in person, it hits you like a train. Anyways, I feel like in a way it was good to have these matchups so early to get it over and done with, like ripping it off a plaster. It was salt in the wound though. Jordan was at Arsenal for 12 years. She's part of the legacy, she's friends with everyone, and Arsenal let her go next to nothing. Alright, I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I could discuss transfers and fees in another episode. Bethany was at Chelsea for 7 years. Also, she's been playing with Millie Bright for the best part of 12 years because they were at Doncaster Bells together. Only 2 seasons not playing together. First because Millie went to Chelsea, then Bethany went on loan to Liverpool. This is legit the first time they've played opposite each other. And don't get me started on those pictures after. Go to my TikTok. It has crazy views. I guess we're all feeling the same. All the photos actually, because as I was preparing this, I looked at Instagram. Sigh. But yeah, it's done. It's out of the way. Bring on the international break. We'll all be happy again. Jokes. Anyway. That aside, I was curious to see what this match would bring and how it would pan out. I have a lot of feelings for the Conti Cup, and perhaps I will cover that in a podcast nearer to the semi-finals. I must say, I felt it took Chelsea a while to get into the game, but when they did, they did. I was messaging my friend when the lineup was announced, and we were on about Fran not starting, and it was questionable. I said, truthfully, I don't think Chelsea need her tonight, but please come back to this text in 45 minutes. When she came on, she scored. Ice cold celebrations, by the way. I was feeling it. I want to end on something because overall I think both teams performed very well, and kudos to Drew Spence for getting that last minute goal, and what a goal it was. I do think Spurs need to bring in more players. Spurs stopped playing when the game was still going on to argue with the ref, to then give Sam Kerr space in the box to play. Like, come on. It is an unwritten rule. Don't give SK20 an excuse or an opening in the box. She will punish you. The Arsenal game proved that she just needs one chance, and Spurs gave it to her on a golden platter. I don't even remember why they were arguing because it made me laugh so much. Probably contact, but come on. Choose your battles, and especially not when Sammy Kerr is on the edge of a box, taking advantage of a free kick. Quote Rusha Littlejohn, Jordan Nobbs is not dead, but she has been resurrected like the baby Jesus at Villa. But I guess in a way, Villa versus Arsenal was a wake for the fans. She of course played because she was not cup-tied like Lucy Staniforth. You cannot deny Jordan's legacy at Arsenal, regardless of what team you support. It was just one of those things in women's football that just made sense. The two went in hand. Jordan Nobbs, Arsenal. Arsenal, Jordan Nobbs. Just went hand in hand. Like the Spurs and Chelsea game, fans were waiting to hear if the game would go ahead, because learning from the weekend, they were both pending pitch inspections. But as temperatures rose, probably like tensions, the game went ahead. I must say, I'm very impressed with Villa at the moment. Rachel Daly is absolutely smashing it, and I won't be surprised if she gets the Golden Boot. There are now calls for her to be England's #1, but that debate in itself is an interesting one, so I'll save it for another day. The transfer window has been huge, so once it closes, I'll do a wrap-up, because there's so much to talk about there. I was pretty surprised at Lucy's transfer too, but it also just made sense. Villa currently mean business. I think they could be top 3 next season. Carla Ward is on it. I love it. I do think last night proved, whilst the transfer window has been great for Villa, there is so much to be done. A 3-0 loss to a title contender, I don't think it's something to stress about too much though. I know it's a cup tie and you want to get to the finals, but at the same time, it's Arsenal. They're where they are because they're a great team. But Villa's game against City at the weekend in the WSL proved that potential. I'm surprised Villa didn't win that game. Now, City and Arsenal have not faced each other all season. Now we have 2 games within a week of each other. So that concludes this week's podcast as we look forward to the FA Cup clashes this weekend. I'm going to end with a little plug for me and for the BBC. Sorry, not sorry, but I think it's justified. So on the iPlayer this weekend, there will be London City Lionesses versus Spurs, and yours truly will be doing the media monitoring for it. So what I ask is that if you watch the game and you have some thoughts, please tweet using hashtag BBC Football and I'll try and share them. The reason why I'm saying this is because from experience doing shifts for both the men's and the women's game, the live text for the women can be a little bit quieter, and we need it loud at the moment. We need it loud. I think this is an absolute amazing opportunity for both the teams. I was going to cover Melissa Phillips leaving in this podcast, but I think I'm going to leave it till next week and see how the team plays first. It's also Chelsea versus Liverpool round 2. We're all hoping that goes ahead. I'm also looking forward to seeing Arsenal versus Leeds, especially after those tweets with Leah Williamson and Amy Woodruff. That is one of my favourite parts of football, if I'm being honest. I think I might lead with that next week. I would like do a little section on it. There's a whole selection of matches coming up this weekend for the FA Cup, and it's very exciting. Again, this was the 1971 podcast with Fran Lever. I hope you enjoyed listening, and I hope you come back soon. Okay, thank you. Bye.